Congressman Mark Green, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
It's great to be on your show. Really appreciate it.
So, Congressman Green, you're in the thick of all sorts of coronavirus-related government activity or proposals, as far as I can tell. Before we dive into all of that, I saw recently that you described what the Chinese regime, the Chinese Communist Party, did with respect to coronavirus as an ambush. And I'm wondering if you could dig into that for me.
Sure. When I was talking about that, it was with the president, and just basically using it as an analogy of being caught in a desperate situation where seconds need to be, you have to make quick decisions, and not so much as, something China foisted an ambush on us. I think China failed to give us information, and the president was caught in this crisis situation where he had to make split-second decisions.
So, your interest in China, is this something that is long-standing? Or is this something that's, come out of this whole coronavirus situation?
I was concerned about China after reading the book by Michael Pillsbury, Dr. Pillsbury, and that prompted me to go back and read, Unrestricted Warfare, Sun Tzu. I had read Sun Tzu as an infantry officer many, many years ago, but I went back and reread it with this new perspective that the current communist leadership in China really has a warring states mentality and not a Confucian mentality. And that was brought to my attention in Michael Pillsbury's book.
So when this whole, coronavirus / CCP virus, as we call it, situation unfolded, what were you thinking?
Well, obviously, I was thinking that China, the question is did China keep information from the world with malicious intent, or were they just trying to kind of cover their own image? I think it's probably, they were just trying to cover their own image. But that has cost the world dearly. Tens of thousands of lives could have been saved. And so we've got to confront the Chinese communist regime on this issue. That's not going to be easy to do. They're very protective of their image globally. They use disinformation to protect their brand. All of these things, they censor their brand with information with their own populations. All these things have got to be confronted as we go forward with relations with China. Honestly, if you go back, and this is, of course, my readings, but if you go back, it's really started as early as the Tiananmen Square incident. After Tiananmen Square occurred, the hawks in China really took over in the Chinese Communist Party, and they immediately began censoring information and changing the perception of America to the Chinese people. Things like, how we came to their rescue and got the territory that from the Treaty of Versailles had been given to Germany and to Japan, and then got it back to China in a week. They changed the narrative of how America has interacted with China. And it's just, it's unfortunate. It's actually devastating, our relationship with China. And the current leadership is just continuing to propagate both that censor of pro-American stuff in China, as well as, how China is interacting with us. So and internationally. So that's a big issue and something we're going to have to confront going forward.
Well, we're going to talk in just a moment about a couple of bills that you are introducing to kind of counter this China threat. Very interesting bills. Before I go into that, you have also been named onto the Coronavirus Select Committee, which, and I was reading your statement about it. You're not necessarily thrilled with another committee, but what are you looking forward to here, and what do you expect to be doing?
Well, I think there's really two thoughts that I have about that. First, we don't need the committee for the purpose of drilling into the government's response. There are so many other committees. There's the original Oversight Committee, which is a part of Congress anyway. There are other mechanisms that we put into the various acts that have been passed, like the CARES Act, to do oversight. So what I'm really concerned is this is just another of the House majority party, the Democrat Party's efforts to strike President Trump. So if you look at the people they selected to put on the committee on their side, And you look at their history since they've had a majority, it's all been attack Trump. And so there's no reason to suspect that this is going to be anything different. Could this be an opportunity for us to hold China accountable for the mistakes that it's made, for the deception that it's had? Absolutely, that would be awesome. But I'm really concerned that that's not where they're going to let us go on this. They're just going to beat up the president. You can look at Speaker Pelosi's actions. I mean, as late as I think it was first week of February or something, she's actually in Chinatown in San Francisco telling the president he's a racist for blocking travel to China. Now they're out there saying he didn't act soon enough. What is it, Speaker Pelosi? I mean, it just reinforces the fact that this is another, I think, going to be another political game for them, when we really ought to be looking at why China, lied to the World Health Organization and encouraged and influenced the World Health Organization to lie with them. I think we ought to look into that, and hopefully we will.
Congressman Green, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, I've been watching Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi's record for, the better part of 20 years, and she has been, frankly, very strong on China, a lot stronger than many Republicans, quite frankly. And so there may be an opportunity here. What would you envision the committee to do in a little more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we could look at things like our PPE supply lines, why is it that all of our medications, or many of our medications, the vast majority of our antibiotics, the precursors are made in China? I mean, this is something that we have to rethink as a country. So, I'd love for us to dig into some of that stuff. But I don't know that that's what she's going to allow to happen. But that's an example of stuff we should get into. Okay.
So let's talk about these two bills that you have. I'm going to dig them up here. There's basically two. Why don't we start with the bill that focuses on helping manufacturers move out of China? So basically, I guess a corollary to what you just talked about with the situation with the medical precursors.
Yeah, absolutely. So my bill is actually designed to help those businesses in the middle of this pandemic and its corresponding economic crisis return to the United States. So if they're manufacturing in China and it takes $10 million to move that company's manufacturing from China back to the United States, my bill would allow them to expense that on their tax return as a business expense. And then we would pay for that from the tariff money that we get from China. So in essence, the tariff money would pay for American businesses to move back home and their manufacturing back to America, hopefully Tennessee as much as possible. But so that basically motivates all businesses to come back to the United States. There are other bills out there. I think Marsha Blackburn has a bill that focuses specifically on PPE manufacturing. But my bill would allow expensing for all businesses manufacturing to come back to the U.S.
So it's been related to me by another guest that there's actually at least one or a few F-35 parts that are also come from there.
So that is another issue. And where we have defense-related stuff manufactured in especially China, but really, we cannot be beholden to countries that, the question is China friend or foe, and that debate is a debate we need to have. I've heard China called frenemy, but it's very clear that China wants to be a global hegemon. And if you believe someone like Dr. Michael Pillsbury, they want to be the global hegemon. They want their value system to be sort of enforced throughout the world. And you can look at how they're handling countries where their debt policy addicting these countries to government, debt from China, and then basically seizing control of ports and things like that. I mean, there's a question that needs to be asked: is China a friend or foe? And these kinds of things, where we make a part for a critical aircraft, military aircraft, in China, we can't continue that if the answer to that question is anywhere near foe.
There's this, since we're talking about this, there's also this question of working with companies like Hikvision that produce, the basically, mass amounts of surveillance technology, all these
they make cameras. Yeah.
And these are used in the social credit project and so forth, and of course in Xinjiang in the camp systems and so forth.
Yeah, that's very concerning. And what I'm more concerned about, though, that's a Chinese-based company, right? I'm more concerned about our American-based companies that provide, for example, artificial intelligence that might be used in those systems to commit human rights violations. So I want to ask Google, hey, is any of your technology, assure me, Google, that none of your technology is being used by the Chinese to commit a human rights violation. And for example, the Uyghurs who are, in these camps where re-education is going on, and they're basically, their human rights are being violated. What's happening in Hong Kong with dissidents being arrested? Google, is any of your technology being used to assist the Chinese government to do that?
Sure. No, I understand. Well, so where I'm going with this is actually your second bill, which is there are, as we know, right, and I think even the NATO Secretary General, spoke to this recently. There's these large Chinese companies, which are effectively the Chinese state, going on shopping sprees at the time of this economic downturn, and you're looking to address this head on for the U.S.
Yeah, that's right. So my SOS Act, or Save Our Systems Act, is really designed to prevent China from buying up distressed companies that are distressed because of this, COVID pandemic, buying up those that actually have a national security sort of ramification. So let's say there's a company, and this is hypothetical. What I don't want to do is talk about the companies that we're concerned about, because that would tell the Chinese to go and buy that company. But let's say there's a company that has technology that allows our tanks to traverse, their tank turrets to traverse. Now that small, very unique company with a specific technology is struggling right now, and it's going to sell shares in order to continue its operations. Well, the Chinese could buy that company. A Chinese state-owned entity could buy that company. And then they own the technology that allows our tank turrets to shift left or right. So we have to prevent that from happening. And we want Americans buying those distressed companies, particularly where it relates to, an American national security issue. And so my bill, what it does, it provides investment guarantees so that American investors can go out and purchase those shares of that company. And then if the company fails, because some of them, obviously, if they're selling shares, they're in trouble. So if the company fails, 50% of that purchase is backed by the federal government, much like a small business loan. So if you went and got a small business administration loan before COVID, you're going to start a new company and you got an SBA loan, 70% of that would be backed by the government. Even though you're borrowing the money from a bank, the bank is making the investment in that company through a loan, and then it's backed by the SBA. So we're creating those investment guarantees for American investors to go out and purchase these national defense, national security related companies to keep the Chinese from buying them.
So this buying behavior isn't a new thing, right, for the Chinese Communist Party?
No, there's a very good article in the New York Times, and I am often reluctant to send people to the New York Times these days because of some of their bias, but this is a great article in the New York Times about China on a buying spree in 2017. And in that case, there's a great example of an artificial intelligence that they got. There was a robot company in Massachusetts, and the Air Force was looking to buy shares of the company and save the company, and wound up choosing not to do so. And so when the Air Force chose not to buy it, China came in and bought it. The name of the company is Neurala. And what do you think, oh, robots, it's a vacuum cleaner. Well, it may have appeared benign, but the company was developing artificial intelligence that supported the robots that now the Chinese have. And that artificial intelligence has a military utilization. It can be used for the military. So military application. So now China owns that. and we want to prevent that from happening.
So, exactly in this scenario that you just described, okay, your legislation has been passed. What happens?
So the way it would work if it gets passed is there's a company that's aware that it's it's in a position where it needs to sell shares. They can notify investors. Those investors then make an application to the State Department and DOD, and it starts with SBA. So they make the application to SBA, they administer it, they send the information about the company over to DOD and Department of State. They both give a thumbs up that says, yeah, this is national security implications. They get a certificate from SBA that says half of the investment is back. Those investors then go and purchase those shares with the knowledge of a certificate that if the company fails, they can take it to the federal government and the federal government would reimburse half of their investment. We got to leave. The investors still have to have some skin in the game, right? We don't want them out there fully backed by the government, but we want them, making good decisions, knowing that they've got skin in the game in this company, but rescuing the company from an American investor, and then, they would be backed by the government. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So wait. So it's the investors that trigger this. Is that right?
Yes, it's the investor or the company.
Okay.
I am aware of right now a company with a technology that is used by Department of Defense, and they don't want to be bought by China, but they're in a desperate situation. So they could let investors know and be a part of starting this process, knowing that they've got a defense-related technology.
Yeah, I can imagine this sort of setup also, spurning a lot of, because a lot of kind of, I guess, development in the small businesses related to the defense industry.
Well, that would be fine because China like 2 weeks ago, bought 8 ports globally. And that's scary. Where does the United States Navy dock its ships? They bought 22 aircraft from United. So this is an infrastructure thing. It's not necessarily defense related, but the United States military does use American airframes to deploy soldiers to, say, the Middle East. Right? We lease aircraft from our own aircraft industry to ship people sometimes, to ship equipment overseas. Now China owns 22 of United's planes, and they're leasing them back. And these are concerning things. What we want to do is make sure that those companies that have technologies right now that we need don't get bought by China.
Any final words before we finish up, Congressman Green?
No, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. These are great questions.
Well, have yourself a wonderful day and looking forward to having you back sometime in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you. You too.